until 1:01. All right. We'll give just a minute here to see if there's anybody else who pops in. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I don't like to delay the beginning of things when people are here on time. So here we go. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Amy Cheney, and I'm the president and CEO of Crayons to Computers in Cincinnati, Ohio. And as a way of kind of an introduction to this session, I wanted to give you just a little bit of my background. And so for those of you who don't know, I've been here at Crayons for a little bit more than 6 years, but my background previously for almost 24 years was on the staff of the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. So I was in the community foundation world for a very long time. I worked on the donor side, but I was around grant makers and people who talked about impact and evaluation on a regular basis. In October of 2017, when I arrived here at Crayons to Computers, I felt good instinctively, you just feel it in your gut that we do good things. We're making good things happen. We have, because of our history, and I'm sure this is true for many, a very retail model. We shared lots of numbers. We shared how many shops we had in a particular year. We shared the dollar value of product that we distributed. We shared the number of unique teachers who shopped through our program. All of those are outputs. They felt good and important, but it didn't feel like it was quite enough of the story. And so I came here, and in part because of my background at the Community Foundation, and in part because I knew that donors and funders were starting to ask more questions about the difference that we make, I was trying to figure out how could we tell more about the difference that we make instead of just, kind of stopping with the output numbers. So in my first couple of years, particularly the first 6 months or so, I met with lots of people, and I asked people from the philanthropy community here in Cincinnati, how can we better tell our story? And a lot of the answers that I got were mostly focused on the stories, the anecdotal information, which is great. And lots of donors love the anecdotes and the stories, but that's still only a part of the answer. So fast forward a couple of years, it was April of 2021, and I heard Sherry Cheney Jones deliver a webinar called Turn Data into Dollars. And I tuned in for that through our local, a local organization called the Leadership Council for Nonprofits. And listening to Sherry's presentation, a light bulb turned on. Sherry is the founder of Measurement Resources Company out of Columbus, Ohio. And for more than 20 years, Sherry has worked alongside foundations, nonprofit organizations, and government leaders to help them use data to solve complex social problems and to increase revenue. She is an author, a professor, a social entrepreneur, and an internationally recognized measurement expert. Sherry believes in data, metrics, and accountability. And I'm going to kick it over to Sherry to give some of the background, and you'll hear a little bit of what I heard in that webinar, and then I'll tell a little bit more about our story. And I also wanted to mention, in contrast to some of the other webinars that we have had amongst the teacher resource centers, this really is our story as opposed to a panel of different teacher resource centers and how we do things. So, take it for what it is. It is our story. And I hope that you'll find some nuggets of useful information and maybe some inspiration to do some of this kind of work as well. All right, Sherry, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Amy. It's nice to be with everyone today. I love talking about impact measurement. It's my favorite thing to do. So thank you for the invitation to do this. So we'll talk a little bit about why I am so passionate about impact measurement and measuring your outcomes and how to think about that. And then we'll share, as Amy mentioned, her story. So I am the founder and president of not one, but 2 companies focused on helping nonprofits, government, social enterprises use data to solve complex social problems. I founded Measurement Resources Company in 2008 to help as many nonprofits as possible use data to better tell their story and solve problems. And I did that after a 10-year career in government. So I used to be a government funder. I would evaluate the impact of the grants that we would give out, as well as use that data and information to lobby for different programs, funding, attract federal, state funding to the government, which then pushed that back down into local nonprofits. And in 2008, I was able to help the state of Ohio save $250 million in Medicaid, or demonstrate how our program saved $250 million in Medicaid. And when I saw all of our sister agencies get their budgets slashed, but we were getting our budget funded, I thought to myself, why aren't more nonprofits doing this, using this data? I want to help as many as possible. So that's when I stepped out and formed a measurement resources company. And then after doing that for about 5 or 6 years, I realized that technology was a barrier to a lot of nonprofits and having access and insights to their outcomes and impact data. So I then launched a software company, Sure Impact, which is more of a technology platform. But in the measurement resources side, we focus on all things data. We help nonprofits develop their impact measurement framework, which we'll be talking about today, and Kranz's impact measurement framework. We do program evaluation, social return on investment calculations, impact reports, survey design. So all things helping you do that. We have a national footprint. We work with clients all over the US. And it's not just me. We have a team of very, very smart, very fun people who love data just as much as I do. And so I have a lot of fun every day working with people who want to use data to solve complex social problems. And we also share that we're humans and have people and lives and children and pets and one pinball machine. I'm also the author of the book Impact and Excellence. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, I wrote about in Impact and Excellence. And this whole book was related to research I'm about to share. But as I mentioned, I was in state government and left state government to go to start this company, Measurement Resources. And at the time, I thought of myself as a bureaucrat, a data scientist. I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist. I did not think of myself as an entrepreneur and a trainer and an author and all the things I am today. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, and I launched an unfunded market research study with the whole premise of looking at what kind of data did nonprofits have, how are they using that data, and what results were they getting because of those efforts. And the results that I found, which this little study was originally just going to be for me and my confidence that there would be a market if I quit my job and started a company. But the findings were so powerful that I wanted to share them with as many people as possible. And how do you share results with as many people as possible? Well, this was, back in 2014, before podcasts and all the things we have today. So the best way was to write a book. So in Sure Impact, I share that research as well as the how, a lot of what I'm going to share with you today. So here are the results of the study that changed the course of my life and got me where I am speaking to you today. We identified that there were 3 types of nonprofit organizations. So we had what we call our high performing measurement culture organizations. Those are nonprofits that have data aligned with their mission, and they're strategically using it to make decisions. Then we had our moderate culture organizations, and those had output only data. So as Amy started with they can talk about number of people served or what they did, but they can't talk about how well people are better off. So those are just output data. And then the red bars are our low culture organizations. They had no data really to speak of to tell their story. And how you interpret these graphs are that so if we're going to let's look at our increased revenue. So 62% of our high culture organizations, so those are organizations who have outcomes and impact data and are using it to make decisions, 62% of them had increased revenue versus 18% of our output only and 12% of our no data only group. So what that says is that across the board, when you have impact and outcomes data, you are statistically more likely to do all the things I know you and your boards want to do. They had increased efficiencies within their organization. They were delivering greater results for their community. They also had better external relationships. So that was relationships with funders and donors and the press and the media and public policy. They also had better internal relationships. They had better communication, cooperation, and coordination. And then we already talked about revenues. And so this is the secret sauce. This is what inspired me to really take this message out and help as many nonprofits as possible, because now I've got 13 years of experience watching the nonprofits implement these solutions and raise more money and go and be more successful in their community and increase their relevance. And it's becoming more and more and more, it's been a trend for the last 15 to 20 years, but this trend is accelerating significantly now, where donors are asking for outcomes and impact data because of the technology is more prevalent. I mean, think about your own the millennials and the younger people and your own children that you might interact with, and they don't know a world where they don't have immediate access to impact and outcomes. They've grown up in a world where they have social media. So when they put a post out, they immediately know kind of the engagement of that post. They understand the outcome of that post. And that's just a small little example, but they don't understand a world in which a nonprofit would not know how people and communities are better off because of their services. And as we transition the wealth that we'll see transitioning here over the next 10 years, this new generation of donors, this will be an expectation for them. What really got me going and surprised when I looked at this data was how few nonprofits were having access to outcomes and impact data. We found that in our study, only 25% had impacts and outcomes data and were using it to make decisions, versus the 75% that were in that moderate to low culture. And so this is my personal mission, is to change this trajectory, get everybody the skills and the tools and equipped up so that they can talk about their outcomes and impact and use that data to drive social change. And the exciting thing about this, and I don't have a slide on it, so let me just make a point here, is we also found that there was no correlation between the size of an organization, the budget of the organization, and their ability to be in this high performing category. So basically what we found was that we knew very small organizations, for example, CRANS would have kind of fallen in our smaller organization bucket. And then we had very, very, very large nonprofits that you would know the name of that, were in either one of those categories. So it did not matter the size. It really came down to the number one predicting factor of if an organization was high performing and had impact and outcomes data, it was related to the willingness and the commitment of leadership. That was it. That was the number one driver. It had nothing to do with size and budget. So we'll talk, there's a whole, every nonprofit should be adopting a measurement cycle within their organization. We're not going to talk about all these pieces today. We're going to talk about a few of them. But just to give you an example of all the ways your nonprofit should be using data within your organization, not just thinking about, this one time, I'm going to collect data and I'm going to write an impact statement, which is very important, but it should be an ongoing process. That informs the needs assessments. It informs your program design. It should be included in your strategic planning, in your, decision-making, budgeting. So all of that. But today we're going to talk about the importance of creating a logic model, if you haven't already, and you're developing your theory of change, and then what is an impact measurement framework and why you need one. That's what we're going to focus on today. So the very first step in becoming more impact centric and having outcomes and impact data is this 5 whys exercise. And we did this with CRANS as well. And this exercise is very powerful because it's going to inform what you should be measuring. And the 5 whys exercise is a series of asking 3 questions 5 times. So the first is, why do you do what you do? And this means not why do you personally do what you do, but why does your organization do what it does? So if you're talking about, well, my organization is equipping teachers with supplies, great. Why? Well, why so they can not have to spend their own resources to get the school supplies that children need. Well, why is that important? Well, that's important so that kids can have things that help them learn and grow. Great. Why is that important? Well, that's important so, kids have a better educational experience. However you want to go to those threads, but that's an example of the 5 whys exercise. Then you want to ask the same question about why do your donors and funders partner with you to do your good work? And the third is, why do your participants or clients participate? What do they hope to accomplish? So in your case, it might be, why do the teachers want to partner with you, or why do the schools want to partner with you? And the reason you have to ask these 3 things is because the whys might be different when you look at these 3 different distinct stakeholder groups, and you want to make sure that you're measuring the impact across those 3 whys. So we'll talk more about how those whys come about in developing your logic model in a minute. But as an organization, if you want to tell a great impact story, you need 3 types of data. You need what was done. Those are your outputs. That's related to how many people you served, what are their demographics, what makes them unique or special, as well as what did you do with them. So those are your outputs. Those are your what was done measures. You also need quality measures related to how well you did it. This is often related to client experience, satisfaction, timeliness. Are you meeting their needs? And then also outcomes then is who and how are people better off because of the work that you do. So those are our outcomes. So when you think about telling an impact story, those are the ingredients. Can you talk about what you did and who you did it for? How well are you doing it? And how are people and communities better off because of your work? So a theory of change is, and we'll talk about a logic model and the importance of this, but if this is a new concept for you, a theory of change is the basis of what you will measure, because it's describing the activities that people participate in. What resources do you have to help you do those activities? And what do you produce because of those activities, and what are those outcomes, right? So it's this logical linkage of, there's a problem in our community. Our nonprofit is suited to address this problem in our community through these resources. And when we employ those resources, we do these services. And when we perform these services, we are going to create these short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And you want that on paper, that theory of change, to make a lot of sense. And that that, okay, yes, I can see how if you do this, you would accomplish this, and then this would happen, and this is longer term outcome. And then once you have that, then you can start to apply measurement to it, and we'll walk you through that. So your theory of change is kind of this theoretical, this is the need, this is what we do, and this is what we're going to achieve. Your logic model is going to be on one piece of paper, that roadmap on how you achieve that theory of change. So it's going to show the relationships between those resources, those activities, those outputs, outcomes, and impact. And later, Amy's going to share their logic model that they created. And it gives a funder and a donor and your staff and everybody that you work with a framework for how you do your work and the results that you're trying to achieve. But it also gives us a map on what we can measure. You shouldn't measure everything on your logic model, but it definitely helps you understand when you're talking about your work, what you should be measuring, what you should be quantifying to tell your story. So here's another just description of what our logic models that we help our clients create will look like. We base it off of the Kellogg Foundation logic model approach. There are other approaches where there's boxes and arrows everywhere. I don't think the world is that linear. I think the world is linear, but not that linear. So we take an approach that if you are doing these activities, you'll achieve short-term outcomes. So let me define a short-term outcome. A short-term outcome is what happens immediately after someone engages in your programming. So what happens immediately after a school or a teacher shops at your resource store? What happens immediately to them or their classroom? That's a short-term outcome. A medium-term outcome is what happens after that teacher, that student, that classroom has these new resources and puts them to use. You have a little less control over that, right? You have control over your short-term outcomes. You should have a lot of control over your short-term outcomes, but the medium-term outcomes, now we have a little less control over because we're dealing with other factors, other intervening factors, but you want to design your programs to try to achieve those medium-term outcomes. And then long-term outcomes are what happens after your organization has been in existence and have helped a lot of people over a lot of times, over a lot of years. And these are more of the transformational outcomes. And you likely won't measure these. And Amy's got a great story I know she's going to share later about kind of thinking about those longer term outcomes and what a nonprofit is responsible for and what they're not responsible for. And so these are trends that you'll see, but you probably aren't going to measure these. They will be measured somewhere else. You want to focus on your short and medium term outcomes as a nonprofit when you're telling your story. And so when you're looking at what should we measure, so you've got your logic model and you have all of your outputs and short-term outcomes and medium-term outcomes, and you're asking yourself, well, I only have so much time, energy, or effort. I can't spend my whole life measuring things. What should I measure? Well, the best things to measure are, go back to those whys. And you want to have data that reflect on all of your stakeholders' needs. So you want to make sure you have whys that will help you as a leader and drive your organization forward to be better and more successful. You want to have some measures related to your participants so you can communicate to those that you serve how you're meeting their needs and you're providing value to them. Because if people don't want to use our services, guess what? We can't help them. And then the third is we do want to focus on our funders' whys as well, if they're slightly different than our whys and our participants' whys, because that will help us show our funders why they want to invest in us. So here's an example of a organizational impact framework when I talked about, what was it done, how well was it done, and how people are better off. This is just an example of some metrics. Definitely not and Amy's going to share her framework, but not necessarily your metrics. But again, what was done is typically counts of things done, people engaged. How well was it done? Those will be your satisfaction data, your key performance benchmarks, and then better off are going to be those outcomes. And so you can see now, once you start to take, okay, we've got our logic model. Now we're going to go one step further and we're going to, how are we going to measure these three buckets? This is your impact measurement framework. This is what you'll commit to measuring. And this is how you tell your story then when you're writing, a grant application or you're writing a pitch, is you're telling that story of this is what we did, this is how well we did it, and this is how people are better off because of our work. So I'm going to hand it over to Amy now and let her share her story, how they implemented this process in their organization and what results they've experienced. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions for both of us.
I think we will. Okay, so to go back a little bit in time, as I mentioned at the beginning, I heard a presentation that Sherry did in April of 2021, and it really was a light bulb moment. I was very excited about what I had heard. I shared it with another staff member, and then we shared it with our Programs and Operations Committee, and we had some discussion about it. We reached out to Sherry to say, what would this look like? How do we go about doing this? And in the fall of 2021, we worked on a project with Measurement Resources Company. We had that project funded by 2 donors because it was not something we had anticipated in the budgeting process. And so these 2 donors funded the project for us to create a measurement framework. And I thought I'd share just a little bit about what that process was like. And I have to say, working with MRC was fantastic. But we started out with, MRC did a survey of a number of our different constituents. They did an extensive, what I would call literature review, all kinds of material that we provided. There was data, various types of data that we collected, as well as annual reports and strategic plans and just all sorts of data that really helped them to get a good grounding in what our organization is about. And then it was about November, so it was probably just about 2 years ago, we met for a 4-hour measurement or measure selection workshop. And that workshop started with the review of a draft of the logic model that Sherry has been talking about. And that for us, go ahead, there we go. This is what ours looked like. And it started out as very drafty, but we went through every bit of the items on the screen. We had a lot of discussion about it. We tweaked, we added, and really came out with a logic model that we felt very good about. It. We felt that it really reflected what we were doing. And for us, this was revolutionary. We'd never had a logic model before. Again, as I said earlier, you know, in our gut, we felt like, yeah, we're doing good stuff. This is good. As we put the logic model together, and again, I was around logic models and when I was at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, but had never been involved in doing one or implementing one on the nonprofit side. So this was really an important step for us. And what we realized is that this gave us answers to questions that some of our grant makers were asking us. And we would make something up, but this gives us those answers. You know, we were able to give some very specific information about short-term, medium-term, and long-term impacts that we were hoping to achieve with the work that we're doing. So this was huge for us. Really important. In the end, after that 4-hour workshop, our consultants from MRC went back and really massaged all of the information and came back with a very thorough, very helpful measurement framework document. It's 37 pages, probably about half of it is surveys, which we'd been doing teacher surveys for at least a few years, but we've had a higher level of confidence in the survey because we know that people who are familiar with how to do research and so forth, we're really putting the surveys together. We also had surveys in a couple of additional constituents that we had not ever really done a lot of surveying before. So I'll get to that in just a moment. The measurement framework for us ended up with 9 different areas of measures or different kind of high-level measures. And then 25 individual measures. A lot of that does come from this variety of different constituent surveys. And one of the things I would say is not to be intimidated by it because you do not have to implement the entire measurement framework at once. And you don't necessarily have to do every bit of it every year. I mentioned the enhanced teacher survey and that we had as a result of this work. And what we did, and again, with this was something that MRC helped us with. Let me see if we might take the slides down. I think, yeah, we can do that. So I'm hoping this doesn't blur out, but we have, here, let me turn off. Well, there we go. We have an impact report. This is our second impact report. The first year we asked for MRC to put it together for us, to give us sort of a roadmap of what that might look like. And so this year we did our own attempt at it. And I can certainly, you're not gonna be able to read any of this, but it shows some very high level information that we take out of our surveys. And we sent this out this year to a handful of our major donors, people that we thought would be very interested in it. And it also, some of the data that is in that, actually I can share, I have this, I did pull this up so I could share it. Where'd my share button go? Oh, there it is, right there. Blind. This is what the impact report looks like. I can't see what you're seeing, but hopefully you're seeing the impact report. Yep. And I'll just scroll slowly through the pages, some summary information, information about who responded. These 5 items are really high level, really what we consider to be some of the most important information that we're pulling out of our survey data, perceptions, what teachers perceive that they're getting, again, very important. And if you look at this, you may say, well, the Kids in Need survey does that. They do a little bit. I actually did a comparison of the survey questions side by side, and it's not as much overlap as you might think. I did that within the last couple of months and took a look at the 2. So there's definitely new information that we're getting out of this. So I won't go through the whole thing here, but that gives you a sense of, where's the, stop sharing. Oh, it's over there. Sorry about that. So that has been a very helpful exercise for us. And some of the information from the impact report we featured in our annual report as well, which goes to a lot of people. The other thing, and Sherry alluded to this earlier, and it really, I think, is important to keep this in mind, that it's not just about doing the measurement, but you have to do something with it. You have to use the data to make decisions. And I'm sure that everyone on this call is doing that, a lot of that already, but we do use the teacher survey data, not to just tell us how well we've been doing or how much of a difference we're making, but we use it to evaluate our programs. And so we get our survey data back, and we have a series of meetings with a portion of the staff, and we talk about what enhancements and what changes are we going to make to our programs going into the next school year, so that we're being responsive to the what we're hearing from our teachers, and trying to do as much as we can to remove any barriers to make what we are offering more and more accessible to teachers. I referred earlier to the different constituents that we are surveying. So we're now surveying our volunteers, our family volunteers, as for us, that's just separate and distinct from the corporate volunteers, which might only come in once during the year, but that's certainly another group that we could look to survey in the future. But our family volunteers are coming in weekly or monthly during the program year. Our board and our staff, we're surveying those groups all annually. And through the work to develop the measurement framework, one of the constituents we're going to do an attempt, this will be a first attempt, next school year, 24-25 school year, we're going to attempt a student survey through our teachers, and then something that we think we'll attempt to do every 3 years, but we got to try it once and see how it goes, and we'll learn from it. The other thing that I was wanted to share with you, again, 9 different kind of high-level measures with pieces underneath that. One of those, which we affectionately refer to as Measure 9, was included because we had a board member who was a part of our measure selection workshop who was particularly keen to do this. And it has to do with the hypothesis being that we should see higher proficiency results or higher proficiency rates among students where there's a high level of teacher participation in our organization compared to similar qualifying schools that don't have as high a participation. And again, on its face, that makes sense, but there's a lot of number crunching that has to go into that. And so we, over this past summer, engaged with one of our volunteers who is a retired General Electric engineer and had been helping to pick and pack online orders. And he said to one of our staff members, you know, I'd be happy to do something else if you want. I'm happy. I don't mind doing the online orders, but I'm happy to take on more if you have anything that you'd like for me to do. So I went out into the warehouse one day to talk to him, and I said, Richard, do I remember correctly, you were an engineer in your career? And he said, yes. And I said, well, did you do much with spreadsheets? And he said, I can make spreadsheets sing and dance. And I was like, I have a job for you. So he actually sat down with us and, you know, got an overview of this project, and he set about to do the work to create a benchmark, which was what we needed for the, you know, a place to start to be able to compare future years to. And he completed the analysis focusing just on the state of Ohio. And there is data probably in every state, but definitely in Ohio and Kentucky, where you can get the state proficiency scores for all the schools in the state, or at least all the public schools. So he pulled that data down and into a spreadsheet, and he, you know, isolated the schools that we work with, and he did the analysis. And what he found was that there was virtually no connection or correlation at all between the level of participation and the proficiency rates of students. And that wasn't overly surprising, and he pointed it out. And I also had a conversation with Eliza, who worked with us on our measurement framework project, that and she agreed that there's just too much noise in the world to be able to isolate the effect of school supplies as one important component. But when you look at, is the child hungry or sleepy or cold or ill or clothed or dealing with mental health issues, there's so many other factors that come into play in those actual proficiency scores that, you know, we know that we're doing good work. This is kind of going back to the gut. We know that we're doing good work, but in that sort of arena, it's just too difficult to isolate all of the effects. So one of the things that Eliza said to me was, you have lots of other good metrics to share and not to get too hung up on that. And I know that that has been a conversation over the last few years from time to time, just in different groups, that, maybe we should look at the test data. Well, that's what we found in doing that exercise for the data that we have here in Cincinnati. And I just wanted to ask if Sherry would like to comment any further on that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that completely. And there's also a reason, I think this goes to show why a measurement framework is so important, because had you just launched in with, that was how you're going to measure your success,
Right.
be woefully disappointed. And there is, if you think about using proficiency data, the margin of, like, there's also, I could get really geeky about why you wouldn't want to find that out, just, or you wouldn't, because of variability and other things. But your work is more it is valuable, and you are able to tell a story on how you're creating value for your teachers in your schools beyond just test scores. So I think that's why doing the 5 whys exercise is so important. And that's the survey that Amy said we did. It had included those 5 whys questions in there, and that's how we generated the logic model, or at least the first draft, for them to interact with.
Yeah. So that's everything that I had to share about our particular story. You may have questions, and we have plenty of time. If there are any questions for either Sherry or for me, we would be happy to answer some questions. I hope this has been helpful, and maybe raise some thoughts for you all. I see I can see the chat, but I haven't begun to look at those. Jill, is there anything that you've seen that you think we should take a look at?
You got a question from Karen, and then I'm moving one over from Q&A from
Okay.
Alice.
Okay, I see Karen's question. With Kids in Need surveying our teachers, what timing should we consider for administering our own survey? How much time in between? That has been a challenge. So for a number of years, Kids in Need did their survey in January. And even before we did the measurement framework work, we were also measuring in January, which was way too close. That did not work. Last year, if I recall correctly, Kids in Need launched their survey in April, maybe late April, which was much better timing. We had already shifted a little bit, so we were a little later than we normally were, because we thought they would do theirs in January again. Ideally, we are going to attempt to do our survey probably right after the new year. And then I'm hoping that Kids in Need will continue to do theirs in late spring. They're trying to look at, from my perspective, I think Kids in Need is trying to look at the data that they get from their survey on sort of an annual basis. And so a school year makes more sense for them to be able to report, most of a school year. And I think they were doing it on a calendar year basis, which doesn't seem to align with the program year. For us, we want data for, the experience partway through the year, so that we can evaluate things and make changes for the next year, so that, the spring semester, so to speak, is a great time for us to do that. So that's how we have approached it. And so in our impact report, which, yes, I'd be happy to share. I'm not sure what the best way to share it is, but we'll figure that out. For our impact report, the report that MRC did for us the first time used sort of that partial year on the sort of summary page. For what we did this year, we showed our annual distribution results for the year that was surveyed, but then, the survey itself is done as a partial year thing. So hopefully that makes some sense. But yeah, I think it's important to separate those out a little bit, because it could be a little overwhelming to teachers. Let's see. What do the numbers on my logic model mean? Well, let me see here. Oh,
They're just to help can talk about it.
Yeah, right. It's just putting things in order so you can look at it. And in fact, if you were to see the whole measurement framework, each different measure has subparts, and each of those subparts refers to a number on the logic model. So it's just for reference. It's like number 1 input is staff, and number 59 is a medium-term output, which is about increased morale for teachers. So it just gives an easy way to refer.
Yeah, I was going to answer Alice's question related to, if we already have an older logic model, do we start over or revisit it in some way? So when we're working with organizations, we, obviously often they come with a previous logic model. We still recommend that you go through the the stakeholder 5 whys exercise, where you're thinking about, why do you do what you do? Why do your funders fund you? Why do your participants participate? And what, Crayons did and Amy did is they actually, because it was part of that stakeholder survey, we asked the stakeholders those answers to those questions to hear from them, not just think about why they might, when all their staff answered those too. And then once you have that data, you can compare those results to your current logic model just to make sure you're capturing everything. But I wouldn't just start with I think it's always good to do the exercise and make sure you are capturing on your logic model what those whys are. So it's not like you have to completely throw it away. It's just kind of validate and confirm that your current logic model is still capturing everything it should.
I would also add at this point that we did the measurement framework with MRC, and I feel very strongly that it was an absolutely worthwhile investment for us. I don't know if I should say this in front of Sherry or not, but I did not feel like it was overpriced at all. Sometimes you work with consultants and the prices are like stunning. I thought it was extremely affordable and a very high value for us. We got through the measurement framework. It was the day we finished the measure selection workshop. And there were 3 people from MRC had come down to Cincinnati for that. We wanted to do it in person. It was still COVID times, and we were very excited about being together and having this conversation. It could be done virtually. So if you're thinking about this, I think Sherry and her team are used to working virtually with people all over the country, as you could see from her early slide with all the different organizations they work with. But anyway, we finished that workshop, and I was thinking about what's coming up for us here at Crayons, and we knew we were going to start into a strategic planning process in the first month or so of 2022. And so I asked about that, and I thought, MRC has learned a ton about us, so they already know a lot about us. And so I had a conversation with the folks who were here and followed up with Sherry and said, what would that look like? And so Eliza, who was our main point of contact for the measurement framework, worked with us on our strategic planning process. And again, they already had a lot of information, but Eliza took even more information and put together an amazing current state report for us. I probably have it over on my side table. It was also, again, a couple dozen pages, very thorough. We provided that to the board in advance of our strategic planning retreat, and Eliza facilitated that retreat, worked with us to come up with what is now our current strategic plan. And then as we were beginning the implementation of the measurement framework, which that is one of our goals on our strategic plan, is to implement the measurement framework, we realized that we have limited capacity for data analysis on our staff. And so we reached back out for sort of a very special project. And I mentioned that MRC created the first version of our impact report. Well, that was a special project, as well as, to give us that kind of roadmap for future years. But also they put together a really slick spreadsheet template that will take our teacher survey data and then massage it and bring out some other stuff. We have a few things we have to tweak, and because we did add some questions to the survey, but and they did a training on that, and we have the recording of that. So it's been a very, very helpful relationship with MRC. So if anybody's thinking about doing this, I am happy to share our impact report, and yes, I'll share the teacher survey. But I would encourage you to think about doing your own version, because every one of us there's just little tweaks. We're all doing fundamentally the same kind of thing, but I think there's a lot to be gained to make sure that you've customized for your local community. And, it's definitely was worth it for us. So.
Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to toss out? I'm looking at the comments about what the weather's like in different part of the country at the beginning. It's raining here today.
Yeah, here too.
But it's been gorgeous all week. So, well, if there are no other questions, I will ask Joel for his thoughts. He may have answered. Maybe we'll put our impact report and teacher survey out where the video is. Is that something we could do? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and it looks like Carolyn just asked a question related to a
Okay.
good survey response rate. So it depends on what survey you're talking about. If you're doing the like stakeholder engagement survey to get the answers, of, you know, why do you do what you do, those surveys, our goal is not so much response rate per se, it's representation. So making sure that all stakeholder voices that might have a unique perspective were represented. And then a survey response rate, and Amy, I'll let you tell the group what your response rate is, but I'll tell you from a scientific, scientific perspective, it's not always about the actual response rate. It's about the sample size and how powerful or robust your sample is to generalize to your entire population. And so I use this example a lot with a chili. So think about you're making chili for your family for dinner, or you're making chili for a big block party chili cook-off. You're still going to use the same size spoon when you test if your chili is good, right? So you don't need a bigger spoon when you're serving for a larger population. So a lot of people think like it is response rate. It's actually not response rate. It's about your population and sample size. There's a lot of online, you can go look up sample size calculators, and it will show you, like, if you served, 1,000 teachers, what a good sample size would be. But a rule of thumb is if you're over, if your population that you've worked with is like over 1,000 or a couple thousand people, you want 400. You never really need a sample larger than 400. If it's smaller than that, you might need a smaller a sample would be fine. So that's my answer. Now I'm curious, Amy, what's your response rate?
Well, and you're making me reach back into the memory archives. I think the first year with the measurement framework, I want to say we had something like 1,500 teacher responses. The second year we were a little lower, and I'm somewhere between 1,100 and 1,300. So, but we did use the sample size website reference that Sherry was mentioning. And the first year we blew away like you're looking for a 5% confidence level, or with so much margin of error. The first year we blew it away. We were well above the recommended. The second year, I think we were on target with our participating teachers, but we also survey non-participating teachers, and that was a little bit lower response. So I think it was more like a 10% confidence in that data. So I don't know how helpful that is, but and just to give you a sense, 1,500 teachers responding, I think that was about somewhere around 15% response rate. So if you're looking at response rate, but that's, again, from what Sherry said, that's really irrelevant. It's really how much representation. So we did try to look at it between the different audiences, and we will probably set a target with the student survey when we are ready to do that, but we're going to get input from some teachers to help us with that. I don't know if we will try to survey all students. I think that probably won't likely be the way we'll go about it, but so it'll be a test. We'll see. It's a very simple survey too for students. It's like 5 or 6 questions. And who knows, we do hear anecdotally that when teachers come back from a shopping visit, that the students are very excited. So they're in some classrooms, the students probably do know that Crayons to Computers is a help to them. But in other classrooms, they may have no clue at all. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what we learn from that.
Carolyn had a question about who counts as a non-participating teacher.
For us, we are in year 3 of having an access fee. And so teachers who are in qualifying schools but have not had their access fee covered or have not applied for a hall pass would be a non-participating teacher. We're trying really hard to have others cover the teachers' access fees. And it's a process, just making sure we're communicating. So that's for what it means for us. They're in a qualifying school, but they're not participating. Frankly, if they're in a qualifying school and they don't know about us, we probably don't know about them either. So it's more likely, teachers who maybe shopped in the past. And to Jane's question, the district is probably, I mean, we're probably going to work through our teacher. We have I think as many of you do, are in the process of developing what we're calling Crayons Champions. So we have sort of teacher ambassadors in different schools. So we're going to look to them for help in how best to go about doing a survey with students. So no idea yet what that's going to look like. That's
And in
year
our line of work, we've done a lot of program evaluation with school-based programs, and we've not found challenges getting schools to allow us to survey their kids. There's a couple things you have to make sure you say in that, and that is that you're not identifying the children, making sure that all the data is anonymous, and then also that it's program evaluation. So that's kind of the key. There's different rules for program evaluation versus research. If you call it research, now you're in a whole different class and you need totally different level of permissions. But if program evaluation is actually exempt from needing an IRB, because you're using it to inform your program to improve the services you're providing to the schools and the teachers.
That's a helpful tip. I'm writing that down right now. Great. Well, as to ages and grades, don't know yet. That is TBD. So if there aren't any other questions at this point in time, we can close out the webinar. Thank you all for joining in. And if you have other questions later, you should hopefully, well, here, I'll put my email address in the chat. Gotta be quick though, because I think Joel's gonna close it.
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay.
And you can find more resources about us at measurementresourcesco.com.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank Sherry for being with me today to make this webinar happen. And thank you all for your interest and participation.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks
All
for the
right.
opportunity.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
Friday.
Bye.
Bye.